The bus rattled down the dusty road leading into Fort Benning, Georgia, shaking Emily Carter in her seat. She gripped the edges of the seat, knuckles whitening, staring out the window at the sprawling base that seemed to stretch endlessly under the morning sun. Rows of barracks glimmered in the heat, the brick facades bathed in a harsh orange light. The sound of soldiers marching in the distance carried across the base, rhythmic and intimidating, a reminder of the discipline she was about to step into. Emily's stomach churned with nervous excitement. She had dreamed of this moment ever since she had graduated from her small-town high school in Montana, but the reality was far more imposing than she had imagined. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag across her shoulder, checking the contents one last time. Her boots were scuffed, but polished. Her uniform neatly pressed, tucked in with care. She glanced around the bus and saw a group of recruits whispering among themselves. Most were tall, broad-shouldered men, faces hardened by confidence or arrogance, laughing as if they already owned the place. She felt smaller in comparison, more like an observer than a participant. Beside her, a young woman fiddled nervously with her hair, her eyes wide with anxiety. Emily offered a faint, reassuring smile, but it went unnoticed. This was a world she had never truly belonged to, at least. That was what everyone would assume. The bus jerked to a stop near the main gate, where an imposing metal archway read, "Fort Benning, home of the infantry." The driver honked, signaling that this was the final destination. Emily exhaled slowly, her breath fogging slightly against the cool interior of the bus. She grabbed her bag, swung it over her shoulder, and stepped onto the asphalt, immediately feeling the heat radiating from the sun-baked ground. Drill instructors patrolled the area, their silhouettes sharp and unyielding, eyes scanning every new arrival. The sound of boots striking concrete in unison echoed like a warning. Emily's heart raced as she approached the registration tent, where a sergeant with a stern expression awaited the newcomers. "Name," the sergeant barked as the first recruit stepped forward. Emily hesitated for just a fraction of a second before replying clearly, "Private Emily Carter." The sergeant's gaze lingered, as if evaluating whether she belonged, before moving on to the next recruit. Emily noticed the subtle smirk from a male recruit standing nearby. His posture was relaxed, confidence radiating from him like a shield. "Good luck, Montana Barbie," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for the others to chuckle. Emily ignored it, her jaw tightening. She had learned long ago that people underestimated her because of her quiet nature. Let them laugh. She would let her actions speak later. As she followed the other recruits toward the barracks, Emily's thoughts drifted back to her upbringing on the Montana ranch. Her father had taught her how to handle livestock, repair fences, and most importantly, endure long days without complaint. She remembered early mornings spent on horseback, the smell of hay and earth in her lungs, and the patient discipline required to train a stubborn animal. Those lessons had instilled in her resilience that most people in the city, or even in military bases, would never understand. While others relied on brute strength or loud intimidation, Emily had honed her patience, focus, and determination in quiet, unassuming ways. The barracks were buzzing with activity. Recruits were moving in, claiming bunks, unpacking their gear, and introducing themselves in clumsy, eager ways. Emily found a vacant bed near the window, away from the cluster of loud recruits dominating the room. She set down her bag carefully, taking a moment to survey her surroundings. The walls were bare, except for a single clock that ticked steadily, almost mockingly, reminding her that every second counted. She unrolled her blanket, arranging her belongings methodically, the precision reflecting the mindset she had cultivated over years of responsibility and labor. During the evening meal, Emily noticed the subtle hierarchy forming among the recruits. The loudest, strongest men claimed the front tables, dominating conversation and attention. The quieter recruits, mostly women or smaller-framed men, were relegated to the edges. She sat silently, picking at her food, listening carefully. The banter of her peers was superficial, full of bravado and exaggeration. She observed their movements, noting the way they carried themselves, the way they reacted under the watchful eye of instructors. There was a rhythm to this place, and Emily intended to learn it quickly. After dinner, recruits were directed to the armory for weapon familiarization. Emily's pulse quickened as she stepped into the room, rows of rifles glinting under the fluorescent lights. Most recruits rushed forward, eager to handle the latest, pristine weapons. Emily's eyes, however, were drawn to a corner where an old, rusted M16 rested, almost forgotten. Its paint was chipped, metal dulled by years of neglect. Something about it called to her, not just a weapon, but a challenge. She crouched beside it, running her fingers over the worn grip, imagining the stories it could tell. To her, it wasn't useless. It was full of potential, waiting for someone patient enough to unlock it. As the instructors called the group to attention, Emily allowed herself one last glance at the rusty rifle. The other recruits laughed at her interest, exchanging mocking glances. "What are you doing, Montana Barbie? Trying to fix a relic?" One snickered. Emily's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. She didn't need to explain herself. The world often underestimated the quiet ones, and she had learned that patience and preparation were often far more powerful than words or appearances. That night, in the barracks, Emily lay awake on her neatly made bed, listening to the snoring and chatter of the other recruits. Her mind replayed every detail of the day, the harsh sun, the intimidating instructors, the laughter of peers, and the gleam of that forgotten rifle in the corner. She imagined herself mastering it, turning something discarded into a tool of precision. Sleep came slowly, but it came, heavy with the promise of tomorrow, a day filled with drills, tests, and challenges she was ready to meet head-on. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the window, Emily was already planning her next move. She would observe, learn, and wait for the right moment to prove herself. Fort Benning was a crucible, and she intended to leave her mark, quietly but indelibly. The quiet Montana girl had arrived, unnoticed by most, but carrying a determination that would soon shock everyone who had doubted her. The first week of basic training was a relentless assault on Emily Carter's body and spirit. From sunrise to sunset, the recruits were pushed to the brink, running endless laps, performing push-ups and sit-ups until their muscles screamed, and navigating obstacle courses designed to test every ounce of endurance. Drill instructors barked orders like thunder, their sharp voices echoing across the compound. Emily, smaller and quieter than most of her peers, felt the weight of their scrutiny and the judgment of the other recruits pressing in from all sides. She was immediately singled out. In group exercises, the stronger, louder recruits often blocked her path, ignoring her presence or outright mocking her efforts. "Come on, Barbie. You can't even keep up." One jeered during the morning run, his voice cutting through the cold air. A chorus of laughter followed. Emily gritted her teeth, refusing to respond. Her pride wasn't loud. It was silent, steady, and deeply rooted in years of patience and self-discipline from her Montana upbringing. She had learned long ago that reaction often betrayed weakness. Instead, she focused on every footfall, every breath, every movement, analyzing and improving with each repetition. Sergeant Harris, the lead instructor, was relentless. His hawk-like eyes scanned every recruit, seeking weaknesses to exploit and mistakes to correct. He saw Emily's quiet demeanor as a liability. "Carter, step it up," he barked during a drill, his voice slicing through the morning fog. Emily responded with precision, her movements correct but understated. Harris frowned. To him, she seemed like a shadow present, but barely noticeable. He dismissed her silently, assuming she would break under pressure like the others who had arrived with overconfidence, but no stamina. But Emily's mind worked differently. While others relied on strength, speed, or noise, she relied on observation. She watched the drill instructors carefully, noting patterns in their movements, the rhythm of commands, and the way small mistakes were corrected. She studied her fellow recruits, noticing who would give in to fatigue first, who panicked under pressure, and who relied too heavily on brute force. Every detail mattered, and Emily absorbed them all quietly. In her silence lay a strategy that no one else could see, yet a plan to turn perceived weakness into an advantage. During weapon familiarization sessions, Emily's curiosity and patience began to reveal their value. The other recruits rushed forward, eager to handle the newest rifles, carelessly slamming magazines in and fumbling with the mechanics. They bragged about their previous experience, exaggerating skills they didn't possess. Emily, however, lingered near the back of the armory, observing every rifle with meticulous attention. Her eyes fell on an old, rusted M16 tucked into a corner, its finish chipped and the metal dulled from years of neglect. Most recruits passed it by, whispering jokes about its uselessness, yet Emily felt an unexplainable connection. She crouched beside it, brushing off dust, and ran her fingers over the worn grip. "What are you doing with that junk?" One of the burly recruits scoffed, crossing his arms. "You can't hit a target with that, Montana Barbie." His smirk drew chuckles from the others. Emily ignored them, crouching lower to examine the rifle. It was flawed, yes, but she could see the potential. Years of handling firearms on her father's ranch had taught her to see beyond rust and scratches. Every weapon had a rhythm, a weight, a voice, and this one was whispering to her in subtle ways. She imagined the day she would hold it steady, feel the recoil, and let it perform as if it were brand new. Her interest in the rifle did not go unnoticed. Sergeant Harris, walking the line of recruits, raised an eyebrow at Emily's solitary attention. He approached, suspicion evident in his furrowed brow. "Carter, why aren't you working with the others?" he demanded. Emily looked up, calm, and explained her intention to examine the weapon, to learn its mechanics, to understand it fully. Harris scoffed. "Waste of time. That thing's garbage. Focus on the proper rifles, or you'll fall behind." Emily simply nodded, but inwardly she made a silent vow. She would prove that the so-called garbage rifle could outperform any modern weapon, and she would do it on her own terms. The rest of the week was a series of tests designed to break the recruits' confidence. Obstacle courses left Emily's muscles screaming, yet she endured, one careful, deliberate step at a time. While others stumbled over walls or fell behind on rope climbs, Emily focused on her technique, balancing patience with precision. Her quiet determination often drew the attention of the other recruits, who whispered and snickered about her strange methods. Some called her slow. Some called her timid. Emily called it preparation. Every small movement, every choice, was part of a larger strategy she kept to herself. By midweek, the whispers of doubt had intensified. Male recruits continued to taunt her, pushing her to the edge of frustration. One day, during a timed obstacle course, a large recruit deliberately stepped in her path, causing her to stumble. Laughter erupted around her. Emily's face flushed, but she steadied herself, completing the course flawlessly. When she crossed the finish line, she didn't raise her arms in victory. She simply breathed deeply, shoulders back, eyes forward. To most, it was unremarkable. To those paying close attention, it was a display of focus under pressure, a sign that Emily's strength was not in noise or bravado, but in calm, deliberate control. That evening, Emily returned to the armory under the guise of cleaning her assigned weapon. She slipped past the other recruits and approached the corner where the old rifle rested. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. She disassembled it carefully, noting rusted screws and dulled components. As she worked, the rifle seemed to respond to her touch, almost like it recognized her skill. Hours passed unnoticed, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the room. Emily's meticulous attention transformed a neglected weapon into a tool that was clean, functional, and ready for action. By the time the armory doors closed for the night, Emily stood back and examined her work. The rifle gleamed under the harsh lights, and she felt a rare surge of satisfaction. No one had witnessed this moment. No one had offered praise or mocking. It was entirely hers. In that quiet, solitary triumph, Emily realized that the greatest battles were often fought in silence, away from the eyes of those eager to judge. And in that silence, she began to plan for the day she would prove herself to the instructors, to her peers, and most importantly, to herself. That night, in the barracks, Emily lay awake, her mind replaying the week's trials. The taunts, the physical exertion, the scrutiny, they all fueled a quiet fire within her. She visualized the old rifle, its weight in her hands, the feel of the trigger, the recoil, the perfect shot. Every detail mattered. Every movement mattered. By the time the lights went out, Emily was no longer the quiet, underestimated recruit who had arrived on the bus. She was a strategist, a student of patience and precision, ready to turn ridicule into respect, doubt into awe. And in the shadows of the barracks, the old M16 waited silently, rust and all, unaware that it had already chosen its master. The next evening, the barracks were alive with a low hum of exhaustion. Recruits trudged back from drills, muscles sore and spirits frayed. The room smelled of sweat, liniment, and fear, the scent of a group being pushed beyond what they thought possible. Emily Carter, however, felt a quiet sense of purpose. She had claimed a corner of the armory as her sanctuary, a space far from the laughter and whispers of her peers. The object of her focus was an old M16, set aside long ago and labeled unserviceable. Its rusted metal and chipped paint had discouraged countless others, but to Emily, it was an opportunity. She approached the rifle like a sculptor examining raw clay. Every scratch, every patch of rust, told a story, a history of misuse and neglect. Emily's fingers traced the worn grip, noting the subtle warping of the stock, the tiny imperfections that most would overlook. She knew, instinctively, that if she treated the rifle with patience, care, and understanding, it could perform as well as, if not better than, any modern weapon in the armory. Her Montana upbringing had taught her that even the roughest tools could be restored with time, effort, and precision. Emily began disassembling the rifle piece by piece, methodically setting each component on the bench. The sound of metal clicking against metal echoed softly in the armory, a rhythmic percussion that contrasted with the chaos of the day outside. Drill instructors and recruits often underestimated the value of methodical preparation, rushing through tasks in the hope that speed would mask their lack of skill. Emily, however, welcomed the slow, deliberate pace. With every screw she unscrewed, every part she polished, she felt a growing sense of connection, not just to the rifle, but to the discipline it demanded. Hours passed. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, casting shadows that danced across the rifle's components. Emily worked tirelessly, her hands moving with practiced precision, never once rushing or skipping a step. She applied solvent carefully to loosen rust, brushed away grime, and meticulously inspected the inner mechanisms for signs of wear or damage. It was painstaking work, but she had learned the value of patience on the farm hours spent repairing fences, tending livestock, and waiting for the right moment to act. This rifle, like her work back home, demanded attention, respect, and endurance. The armorer wandered in occasionally, his presence more curiosity than oversight. "What are you doing, Carter?" he asked one evening, leaning on the doorway. "That rifle's a relic. You won't get a shot out of it." Emily didn't flinch. She looked up, her calm gaze steady. "It just needs the right care," she said softly. The armorer shook his head, amused but intrigued, and left her to her work. She didn't need validation. She needed only to focus. The rifle was her task, her challenge, and the proof of her patience would come in time. As Emily polished the barrel, she reflected on her life before the base. Growing up on a ranch in Montana, she had learned to treat every tool with respect. Old shotguns, worn rifles, farm equipment, they all had value if handled correctly. She had spent mornings before sunrise cleaning gear, practicing aim, and learning how balance, timing, and intuition could overcome inexperience. The lessons were ingrained in her muscle memory, in her quiet confidence, in the way she moved without hesitation. Here, in this noisy, chaotic environment, that knowledge gave her an edge no one else could see. The rifle slowly transformed under her care. Rust disappeared, screws tightened, and mechanisms that hadn't moved smoothly in years began to click like new. Emily tested the trigger gently, feeling the weight of it, the subtle resistance, the recoil spring responding perfectly. Her hands were steady, her breathing controlled, her mind focused entirely on the task. Time seemed irrelevant. The world outside the armory faded, the laughter, the taunts, the exhaustion of the other recruits, all dissolved into background noise. This was her moment, quiet and uninterrupted, where skill and patience were the only currency that mattered. She cleaned every inch of the rifle, from the barrel to the stock to the smallest internal components. She oiled the moving parts, ensuring that friction would be minimal, and adjusted the sights until they were perfectly aligned. The old M16, once considered worthless, now gleamed under the armory lights, a testament to care and precision. Emily felt a surge of satisfaction, tempered by humility. It wasn't about showing off, it was about respect. Respect for the weapon, for the craft, and for herself. She had proven, even if only in her own eyes, that diligence could turn something discarded into a tool of excellence. By the time she finished, the armory was empty. The silence was profound, almost sacred. Emily lifted the rifle, shouldered it, and felt the weight perfectly balanced in her hands. She tested the bolt, adjusted the magazine, and breathed slowly, imagining the first shots she would take. She knew, deep down, that the rifle would respond to her skill and focus. What others had dismissed as obsolete, she had revived with patience and care. Every detail mattered, the grip, the recoil, the sights, and she had mastered them all. Emily's mind wandered briefly to the upcoming marksmanship tests. The instructors would be expecting average scores at best. The recruits who had mocked her would scoff, certain she would fail. But Emily didn't need to worry about their expectations. She was ready. The rifle, once rusted and ignored, was now an extension of herself, a tool that could amplify her focus, her precision, her determination. When the moment came, she would be calm, deliberate, and unstoppable. She placed the rifle carefully on the bench one last time, brushing a final layer of oil over the barrel. It gleamed in the dim light, almost as if it were alive, waiting for the moment when it would prove its worth. Emily stepped back and examined her work, pride swelling quietly in her chest. This was more than preparation. It was transformation. She had turned a neglected, discarded weapon into a finely tuned instrument, just as she would soon turn her quiet determination into undeniable excellence on the range. As she left the armory that night, Emily felt a quiet thrill. The base was still loud, chaotic, and indifferent, but she was ready to enter its heart on her own terms. The other recruits might continue to mock her, and Sergeant Harris might continue to doubt her. But Emily knew something they didn't: skill, patience, and preparation could overcome even the harshest judgment. The old rifle, now restored, would be her proof. And in the shadows of the armory, the rusty M16 rested, gleaming under the light, waiting for the day it would make history, its marksman quiet, steady, and unassuming, ready to shock the base with a precision they would never forget. The morning sun rose over Fort Benning, casting long, harsh shadows across the rifle range. The air was thick with tension, the scent of gunpowder and dust lingering from previous drills. Recruits lined up, rifles in hand, uniforms crisp but sweaty from the early exercises. Drill instructors patrolled the rows, their eyes sharp and unyielding. Emily Carter stood quietly at the back, her hands steady, heart racing with anticipation. Today was the day of the marksmanship qualification test, the moment when years of preparation and patience would finally be put to the ultimate challenge. The other recruits glanced at Emily with skepticism. Whispers circulated along the line. "She'll miss every target," one muttered. Another smirked. "That little Montana girl doesn't stand a chance." Even some of the female recruits looked on nervously, unsure whether Emily's quiet confidence was courage or naivety. Sergeant Harris, walking the line with measured scrutiny, paused behind her. His expression was skeptical, eyebrows knitted tightly. "Carter," he said gruffly, "I hope that relic of yours doesn't embarrass you or me." Emily nodded calmly, her eyes fixed on the targets ahead. The firing line was set. Each recruit would take aim at 5 targets, moving from closest to farthest. The range instructor called out the rules, emphasizing safety and technique. Emily lifted the rifle, the same one she had painstakingly restored in the armory, and felt its weight perfectly balanced in her hands. The metal gleamed under the morning sun, and the polished sights reflected a faint shimmer. In her mind, she reviewed every detail: stance, breath control, trigger squeeze, follow-through. Years of ranch work, farm discipline, and quiet observation coalesced into this single moment. The first recruit stepped forward, fumbling slightly with a modern weapon. Shots rang out, some hitting targets, others striking near misses. The crowd of instructors and recruits murmured, noting mistakes, calculating scores. When it was Emily's turn, the whispers intensified. "She's going to miss," someone said. She ignored them. Her focus narrowed, her senses sharpening. Every sound outside of her breath and the rifle's mechanics faded into a soft background hum. She lifted the weapon, shouldered it with practiced ease, and exhaled slowly, settling into a rhythm honed over years of patient preparation. Her first shot rang out. The rifle recoiled gently against her shoulder, and the round struck dead center on the nearest target. A murmur ran through the crowd of recruits and instructors alike. Emily's breathing remained steady. She adjusted her stance slightly, accounted for wind, and took the second shot. Again, perfect center. The third, fourth, and fifth rounds followed in flawless succession. Eyes widened across the range. Some recruits leaned forward, trying to see what she was doing differently, while Sergeant Harris's brow furrowed in disbelief. Emily's calm, deliberate movements made it look almost effortless, though the focus behind each shot was intense and unwavering. The next set of targets was farther away, at distances most recruits struggled with. Emily's small hands adjusted the sights with precision. Her mind calculated wind, gravity, and subtle vibrations, all without conscious thought. Each round found its mark with uncanny accuracy. The instructors exchanged glances, whispering in disbelief. Emily's reputation as quiet, underestimated recruit evaporated instantly, replaced by awe and curiosity. Even the recruits who had mocked her earlier could only stare, jaws slack, as she continued hitting every target dead center. Every shot she fired seemed to challenge the base itself, the assumptions, the prejudices, the doubt. The final set of targets was the most distant, the ones that usually separated the average shooters from the exceptional. Emily adjusted her position, kneeling carefully, ensuring her stance was rock solid. Her breathing slowed, controlled, each inhale and exhale measured. She squeezed the trigger on the first long-range shot. The round flew, and the bullseye disappeared under the impact. The second, third, fourth, and fifth followed. Each impact was precise, flawless, impossible to ignore. The base, once filled with chatter and casual observation, fell into stunned silence. Every eye was on Emily, the unassuming girl who had mastered a rifle that others dismissed as worthless. Even Sergeant Harris, known for his harsh critique and skepticism, was visibly shaken. He leaned over, whispering to the instructors, That's impossible." But it wasn't impossible. It was skill, patience, and preparation. Every element Emily had learned in Montana, every lesson in endurance, focus, and quiet determination, had culminated in this moment. The rifle, once rusted and abandoned, had become an extension of her body, responding seamlessly to every command, every adjustment, every subtle movement. Recruits who had laughed at her now looked on with reverence and disbelief. Some clapped softly. Others whispered her name in shock. Emily's calm, measured expression never changed. She wasn't performing for anyone but herself. The marks on the targets told the story better than words ever could. The quiet, diligent Montana girl had achieved perfection where others expected failure. Every round she fired rang with quiet defiance, a statement to anyone who had doubted her strength, courage, or skill. After the final shot, the instructor called the line cold, signaling the end of the exercise. Emily set the rifle down gently, her breathing slow and controlled. She didn't smile or celebrate her satisfaction was quiet, internal, a reward for the countless hours of preparation that no one else had witnessed. She straightened her uniform, her calm presence in stark contrast to the chaos of excitement and disbelief swirling around her. The base had just witnessed the impossible, the quiet recruit who could outshoot everyone with a rifle no one believed in. Sergeant Harris approached, his expression a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. "Carter," he said, voice tight, I've never seen anything like this." Perfect score. With that relic, Emily nodded politely, shrugging slightly. "It wasn't the rifle," she said softly. "It was preparation." The statement, simple as it was, carried more weight than any boast. The instructors murmured among themselves, realizing that what they had witnessed was more than skill. It was discipline, patience, and focus embodied in one quiet recruit. As the other recruits filed past, still in shock, Emily's peers stared, some with envy, others with newfound respect. The boy who had mocked her on the bus whispered, almost inaudibly, How did she do that?" Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her actions spoke louder than any words. In the midst of Fort Benning, she had turned skepticism into admiration and doubt into awe. The rifle that had once been dismissed as worthless had proven its value in capable hands. By the time the range emptied and the sun began to dip in the sky, Emily stood quietly at the edge, looking over the targets. Every bullseye, every perfect shot was a testament not just to skill, but to patience, focus, and determination. The base would remember this day, the quiet Montana recruit who picked up a rusty rifle and shocked everyone by hitting every target. No one would ever underestimate her again. And Emily, as always, remained calm, steady, and quietly confident, knowing this was only the beginning of the challenges she was ready to face. The firing line was silent now, the hushed murmurs of recruits and instructors replaced by the unmistakable focus of anticipation. Emily Carter stood alone, her hands steady, heart measured, breathing controlled. The morning sun glinted off her rifle, the same one she had restored painstakingly in the armory. Every rifle on the line had been tested that day, yet none of the recruits' performances had matched the quiet precision she was about to unleash. The air seemed heavier here, charged with disbelief and curiosity. Everyone was watching, though most did not yet understand what they were about to witness. Emily's first target was 50 yards away. Most recruits struggled to center even a single shot at this distance, often letting nerves or overcorrection sabotage their aim. She crouched, shoulders squared, eye trained on the bullseye. Her Montana upbringing had taught her more than survival. It had taught her patience, observation, and calm in high-pressure moments. She exhaled, controlled her heartbeat, and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle discharged with a soft, precise crack. The round struck perfectly in the center. A murmur ran through the onlookers. The instructor furrowed his brow, double-checking the target. "No, that can't be right," he muttered. Emily's expression remained neutral, unshaken by the whispers or astonished glances. She moved to the second target, 55 yards this time, slightly elevated. Adjusting for wind and distance, she lined up, exhaled slowly, and fired. The bullseye disappeared. Again. By the third target, the crowd had grown restless with disbelief. Whispers became audible, even from recruits who had been previously mocking her. "How is she doing this?" one asked. "There's no way," muttered another, eyes wide, hands gripping their own rifles nervously. Emily's movements were fluid, almost hypnotic in their calm precision. With every shot, she demonstrated not just skill, but mastery over the mechanics of the weapon and the discipline of her mind. The fourth and fifth targets were the most difficult, placed at varying angles with subtle obstacles meant to challenge aim. Many recruits had already failed to hit one perfectly at this distance. Emily adjusted her stance with meticulous care. Her legs were firm, her breathing steady, eyes trained on each bullseye. She visualized the rifle as an extension of herself, the mechanism responding intuitively to her commands. Her fingers pressed the trigger, each shot punctuated by the soft echo of metal and gunpowder. Bang, bang, the round struck precisely as intended. Shock rippled through the firing line. Instructors whispered among themselves, some leaning closer to double-check the targets. Sergeant Harris, whose skepticism had been relentless, now stared in disbelief. He walked over, inspecting the target and Emily herself. "Perfect. Every single one," he muttered under his breath, almost refusing to accept it. Emily's calm response was simply a nod. She didn't seek approval or applause. The satisfaction was quiet and internal, born from preparation, patience, and determination. Even the recruits who had laughed at her on arrival were stunned into silence. Some shuffled awkwardly, unsure whether to applaud or remain frozen in awe. The boy who had mocked her on the bus stood dumbfounded, staring at the bullseyes. How did she do that?" he whispered to no one in particular. Emily didn't respond, her focus already shifting to the next challenge. In her mind, this was only a test, a demonstration of what meticulous preparation and calm under pressure could achieve. The final set of targets farthest away, over a small hillock, were considered nearly impossible for novice marksmen. Many had failed to hit even one, blaming wind, distance, or the unpredictability of the range. Emily adjusted the rifle sights, accounting for subtle shifts in elevation, wind direction, and her own stance. She exhaled slowly, controlled her heartbeat, and fired. The round struck the bullseye dead center. Bang! The second shot was just as perfect, and then the third. Her precision was flawless, consistent, and unrelenting. By the fifth and final shot, the range was dead silent. Recruits stared, unable to comprehend what they had witnessed. Instructors exchanged incredulous glances, murmuring, "Perfect. Every single one. She's impossible." Sergeant Harris, usually quick to criticize, found himself at a loss for words. He approached Emily, his face a mix of astonishment and grudging respect. "Carter," he said finally, voice low but steady, "I've never seen anything like this. Every target, every shot. With that rifle." Emily simply nodded. "It wasn't the rifle," she said softly. "It was preparation." Her words carried more weight than applause ever could. The audience realized that what they had witnessed was more than marksmanship. It was the culmination of years of focus, discipline, and patience. Emily had turned a neglected, rusty weapon into a perfect instrument of skill, demonstrating mastery far beyond what anyone had expected. The quiet Montana recruit, previously underestimated and mocked, had transformed in minutes into a figure of awe and respect. Recruits who had once taunted her now approached cautiously, asking for advice, trying to understand the techniques that had allowed such flawless shooting. Some were inspired, others envious, and a few were simply in shock. Emily responded patiently, guiding a few of the curious recruits through stance and breathing, though she never revealed the depth of her skill. It was enough for them to witness her control, to understand that mastery came not from arrogance, but from preparation and respect for one's tools and oneself. The armory, once a place of quiet observation, had become the stage for her triumph. The rifle she had restored, once rusted and dismissed, now gleamed with purpose. Every component functioned perfectly, each shot a testament to her careful attention. Emily's calm demeanor, her methodical approach, and the precision of her actions created a ripple effect across the base. Today, she had redefined what was possible. By the end of the exercise, the range was filled with murmurs of disbelief and admiration. Emily had achieved perfection, not through brute force, intimidation, or luck, but through patience, observation, and relentless focus. She had transformed skepticism into awe, doubt into respect, and ridicule into recognition. The base would remember this day, the quiet Montana recruit who had picked up a rusty rifle and shocked everyone by hitting every target flawlessly. Emily replaced the rifle on the bench, her movements deliberate and controlled. The sun now hung high, casting long shadows across the range. She did not smile or celebrate loudly. The accomplishment was hers alone, internal, a quiet triumph born of meticulous effort and focus. As she stepped away, recruits whispered among themselves. Instructors nodded in disbelief. And Sergeant Harris, normally harsh and unyielding, simply shook his head, muttering, "Unbelievable." And in that moment, Emily Carter had not only mastered the rifle, but she had also transformed perception. She had proven that skill, patience, and preparation could outshine arrogance, loudness, and overconfidence. The quiet girl who had arrived on the bus with everyone's doubt now stood as the embodiment of calm, precise mastery. The legend of the Montana recruit with the rusty rifle had begun. The firing line had long emptied, but the echoes of Emily Carter's shots still reverberated through the range. The once chaotic space had fallen into stunned silence, recruits frozen in disbelief, instructors exchanging incredulous glances. Sergeant Harris, usually a pillar of rigid authority and unshakable expectation, stood with his hands on his hips, eyes wide, jaw tight. "Perfect. Every single one," he muttered, almost to himself, as he replayed the moment in his mind. It was impossible, or at least, that's what he had believed. Yet the target boards, each marked with flawless bullseyes, told the undeniable truth. Word spread quickly. By mid-morning, whispers and murmurs of astonishment had traveled across the base like wildfire. "Did you see Carter?" one recruit asked, eyes wide. "Every shot. Dead center." Another nodded, still pale with shock. She hit them all. With that rifle." The words repeated and amplified, carried from barracks to training fields, dormitories to mess halls. Emily, meanwhile, remained composed, walking back to the barracks with a rifle cradled gently in her hands. She did not boast or exaggerate. There was no need. Her work spoke for itself. The reactions from her peers were mixed. Those who had mocked her on the bus, calling her Montana Barbie and whispering that she couldn't survive basic training, now found themselves uncomfortably aware of her quiet competence. Some avoided eye contact, ashamed of their earlier judgment. Others, curious and grudgingly impressed, approached tentatively, asking about her technique. Emily answered patiently, offering measured advice about stance, breath control, and focus, but never revealing the depth of the skill that allowed her to achieve perfection. She understood that recognition was earned in action, not in words, and that humility was as powerful as precision. Sergeant Harris, however, was not so easily placated. He had spent years training recruits, believing he could predict performance based on physical presence, attitude, and prior experience. Emily Carter had defied every expectation. He summoned her to his office, a space filled with charts, manuals, and the weight of authority. "Private Carter," he began, his voice steady but tinged with disbelief. "I've seen hundreds of recruits come through the space. Most I can gauge in a day. You, I can't. Every shot. Perfect." "Relic?" Emily looked up, calm, measured. "It wasn't the rifle," she said softly. "It was preparation." Harris's eyes narrowed, a mixture of incredulity and respect settling over his features. He studied her quietly, noting the subtle confidence in her posture, the calm determination in her gaze. Finally, he leaned back, exhaling heavily. "You've earned something rare here, Carter. Not just skill, but discipline, patience, and focus. That level of mastery doesn't come from arrogance. It comes from hard work. Keep it up, and you'll set a standard for everyone on this base." Emily nodded, her lips curling into a faint smile, acknowledging the praise without exaggeration. She didn't need applause. Her results were already her reward. The news spread further. By noon, the base commander himself arrived at the rifle range to see the recruits' marksmanship and investigate the reports of Emily's flawless performance. He walked among the targets, inspecting each board with careful attention. His eyebrows lifted as he observed the perfect bullseyes. "Who was responsible for this?" he asked, voice carrying over the murmurs. One of the instructors pointed toward Emily, who had returned to the range to observe quietly. The commander's eyes fell on her, and a rare smile touched his features. "You?" he said, almost incredulously. Emily nodded. "Yes, sir." The commander studied her for a long moment, as if weighing the enormity of what she had accomplished. "Private Carter," he said finally, "your performance today was extraordinary. You have not only proven your marksmanship, but you have also demonstrated qualities we value, above all else: discipline, focus, and patience. Well done." Emily's posture remained composed, and she inclined her head respectfully. In her calm acknowledgement, she showed that recognition and respect were earned through action, not seeking attention. As the day progressed, Emily's accomplishment became a touchstone across the base. Recruits approached her with questions, asking how she maintained such steady focus under pressure, how she controlled her breathing, and how she approached the rifle. Emily shared her insights selectively, emphasizing preparation and patience. Slowly, a subtle transformation occurred in the barracks and training fields. Recruits who had once mocked her now listened, some copying her techniques, others silently admiring her quiet confidence. Even the toughest, most arrogant soldiers began to see her as a model rather than a target of ridicule. Sergeant Harris, too, began to reassess his assumptions. He watched her during drills, noting her patience with younger recruits, her attentiveness to detail, and the quiet authority she commanded without speaking loudly or asserting dominance. Emily's performance on the range was no longer a single, isolated event. It had become evidence of her potential for leadership, resilience, and skill. Harris realized that she was not simply a talented recruit. She was a standard-bearer, an example of how preparation and focus could redefine expectations. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the base settled into a rare moment of calm, Emily returned to the armory. The rifle rested on the bench, polished and gleaming. She studied it briefly, tracing her fingers over the stock, appreciating the careful restoration she had accomplished. It was more than a tool. It was a symbol of transformation, the tangible proof that diligence and patience could overcome doubt and ridicule. Emily had not only restored a rifle, she had restored the belief that quiet determination could accomplish the impossible. In the barracks, whispers continued, a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Recruits discussed her performance in hushed tones, each recounting the perfect shots they had witnessed. "She made it look easy," one said. "I can't believe she hit every single target." Another admitted grudging respect. "I'd never underestimate her again." The narrative of Emily Carter, the quiet Montana girl who had picked up a rusty rifle and shocked the base, was already taking shape, spreading like wildfire among those who valued skill, focus, and perseverance. By the time night fell, Emily lay in her bunk, reflecting on the day. She didn't dwell on praise or recognition. Instead, she considered what the experience had taught her. Confidence came not from boasting, but from preparation. Respect was earned through action, not words. And the quiet determination of a single individual, wielded with focus and patience, could inspire even the most skeptical and hardened observers. Emily knew that this was only the beginning of her journey, that challenges lay ahead, but she had proven to herself, and now to the entire base, that she could rise to meet them. In the weeks that followed, Emily's performance on the range became a benchmark. Drill instructors referenced her technique during training, and recruits sought her guidance, some timidly, others eagerly. Sergeant Harris began assigning her leadership roles in small exercises, watching how she guided others with quiet authority. Emily's presence subtly reshaped the culture among her peers. Arrogance and mockery gave way to curiosity and respect. She had become more than a markswoman. She had become a model of discipline, patience, and quiet strength. By the end of the week, Emily Carter was no longer just the underestimated recruit who arrived quietly on the bus. She had become a recognized figure on the base, the girl who had taken a rusty, discarded rifle and transformed it into a tool of perfection. The whispers of disbelief had evolved into stories of admiration, and her example set a tone that would influence recruits for weeks, months, and perhaps years to come. The Montana girl had arrived quietly, but she had left an indelible mark on the targets, on the base, and on everyone who witnessed her extraordinary skill. The day after her flawless performance on the rifle range, Emily Carter returned to the barracks with a quiet sense of purpose. The whispers and stares she had endured from her peers had shifted curiosity, now replaced ridicule, and admiration had begun to ripple through the ranks. Recruits who had once dismissed her as timid or incapable now found themselves observing her every move, hoping to learn something from the quiet Montana girl who had outshot every other recruit. Emily, as always, remained composed, aware of the subtle shift in attention, but uninterested in exploiting it for ego. The first indication that she had become more than just a remarkable shooter came during morning drills. Sergeant Harris, who had long been skeptical of her abilities, called her forward to demonstrate proper rifle handling to a small group of recruits struggling with their aim. "Carter," he barked, "show them how it's done. Don't just tell them, teach them." Emily stepped forward, her posture calm and deliberate. She lifted the rifle they hold, restored M16 that had become almost legendary on the base, and moved through the motions methodically. She began with the basics, demonstrating how to adjust stance, hold the rifle firmly yet naturally, and align the sights. She spoke quietly but with authority, emphasizing patience over haste. "Don't rush," she instructed. "Observe. Feel the rifle. Control your breathing." Precision comes from preparation, not speed. The recruits watched, some skeptically at first, others leaning forward with intense concentration. Emily guided each one through the motions, correcting small mistakes with gentle, precise instructions. Her calm demeanor, paired with flawless execution, made even the most hesitant recruits more attentive. Word of Emily's informal mentorship spread quickly. By the end of the day, small groups of recruits were seeking her out, asking for guidance on marksmanship, discipline, and focus. She didn't charge herself with leadership. Rather, she led quietly through example. Her influence was subtle but powerful. A recruit who had struggled to hit a single target now improved measurably under her patient guidance. Another, previously boastful and overconfident, began to appreciate the value of deliberate preparation. Emily's quiet presence transformed the culture around her, inspiring others without the need for overt instruction or authority. Sergeant Harris, observing from a distance, began to notice the changes. Recruits who had been unruly or dismissive now approached drills with focus, often seeking Emily's advice. Their performance improved, and morale once fractured by competition and ridicule shifted toward collaboration and learning. Harris realized that Emily's influence went beyond marksmanship. She was cultivating a sense of discipline, responsibility, and respect among her peers. "She's not just a sharpshooter," he murmured to another instructor. "She's a natural leader." Emily's mentorship extended beyond the rifle range. During obstacle courses, she guided recruits through strategies for pacing, endurance, and technique. She encouraged careful observation and planning, reminding them that physical strength alone would not guarantee success. She modeled patience, focusing on steady improvement rather than immediate results. Slowly, recruits who had once mocked or dismissed her began to emulate her behavior quietly, deliberately, and with growing respect. One afternoon, a group of new recruits struggled with an advanced marksmanship exercise involving moving targets at varying distances. Frustration mounted as shots missed by inches. Emily stepped forward, not with authority, but with calm observation. She demonstrated her approach step by step, emphasizing breath control, sight adjustment, and the subtle anticipation of each target's movement. Recruits followed her instructions, and one by one, they began to achieve success. The air, once thick with frustration and doubt, now carried an energy of possibility and focus. Even Sergeant Harris could not help but acknowledge the transformation. He approached Emily privately after the exercise. "Carter," he said, voice measured, "you've changed the dynamic here. These recruits are performing better because of you, not because I instructed them, not because of the drills, but because they are learning from you." Emily nodded humbly. "It's not about me," she replied softly. "It's about showing them what's possible when they prepare and focus." Harris exhaled, realizing that leadership, true leadership, could sometimes come quietly, without overt demands or authority. Emily's influence began to extend into the barracks as well. Recruits came to her with questions about routine, preparation, and discipline. Some sought guidance on maintaining calm under stress. Others asked about strategies for focus and attention to detail. She answered patiently, sometimes demonstrating through action rather than words. Slowly, she built a network of respect and mentorship, a quiet legacy that reached beyond marksmanship alone. Her peers had learned a powerful lesson. Strength was not always loud, and skill was not always flashy. True mastery required patience, discipline, and humility. By midweek, Emily had become a central figure among the recruits. Though she never sought the title or recognition of leadership. She led by example, demonstrating that careful preparation, attention to detail, and respect for tools and process were as important as raw talent. Recruits who once laughed at her methods now followed her instructions without question, their performance and confidence improving noticeably. Emily's mentorship fostered a sense of unity and shared purpose, transforming the base culture one recruit at a time. Even the base commander took notice. During a routine inspection, he observed Emily working with a group of recruits, quietly correcting their stance and guiding their technique with patience and precision. He watched as recruits, once uncertain or anxious, followed her guidance with growing confidence. "Who is that?" he asked an instructor. "Private Carter," came the reply. The commander's eyes widened slightly, impressed not just by her skill, but by the respect and influence she had earned among her peers. Emily's quiet leadership became legendary on the base. Recruits referred to her advice as essential for success, and instructors began to recommend her for additional responsibilities in training exercises. Her ability to mentor, guide, and inspire through example transformed the perception of what a recruit could accomplish. The Montana girl, who had arrived quietly and been underestimated, had now become a figure of guidance and influence, shaping the experience of every recruit who crossed her path. At the end of long days, Emily often returned to the armory to polish and care for her rifle. The same weapon that had earned her fame on the range now symbolized the discipline, patience, and focus she instilled in others. Every scrape she removed, every adjustment she made, mirrored the lessons she taught her peers. That careful attention, deliberate action, and quiet determination could yield extraordinary results. The rifle was more than a tool. It was a tangible representation of her philosophy and her leadership. By the close of the training cycle, Emily had left an indelible mark on the base. Her peers had come to rely on her guidance. Her instructors had learned to respect her calm authority, and the culture of the base had shifted subtly yet profoundly. Where once there had been doubt, mockery, and underestimation, there was now respect, focus, and the quiet acknowledgement of what true preparation and discipline could accomplish. Emily's mentorship had become as legendary as her marksmanship. The Montana recruit, who had once been quiet, underestimated, and mocked, had grown into a symbol of leadership, skill, and inspiration. Her story was no longer just about hitting every target. It was about showing that patience, focus, humility, and guidance could transform not only herself, but everyone around her. Emily Carter's quiet influence ensured that her legacy would endure, setting a standard of excellence and leadership that would inspire future recruits long after her time at Fort Benning. Months had passed since Emily Carter first picked up the old rusted M16 in the corner of the Fort Benning Armory. What had started as a quiet experiment in patience and focus had transformed into a legacy that would ripple across the base for years to come. Recruits who had once whispered behind her back now sought her guidance, not only for marksmanship, but for lessons in patience, discipline, and leadership. Emily, always composed, had embraced her new role quietly, offering mentorship to those who showed curiosity and respect. Her mornings were now regimented but purposeful. While others rushed through drills, she moved deliberately, focusing on every detail: proper stance, careful aim, steady breathing. Her calm demeanor became contagious. During obstacle courses and physical training, younger recruits followed her movements, observing how she maintained focus under fatigue and pressure. Sergeant Harris, who had once doubted her, now frequently referenced her as an example during lessons. "Follow Carter's lead," he instructed during drills. Discipline, patience, precision, she embodies all three. Emily never sought the spotlight, but it naturally followed her. The old rifle, which had earned her notoriety, remained a symbol of her journey. Meticulously maintained, polished, and cared for with reverence, it was no longer just a weapon. It was a testament to transformation. Emily often held it during quiet moments in the armory, running her fingers over the worn stock, remembering the long nights she had spent cleaning, adjusting, and perfecting it. Each time she raised it to the firing line, she did so with purpose, not ego. She had learned that true mastery was not about impressing others, but about understanding and respecting one's tools and oneself. Her reputation grew steadily. Recruits told stories of the Montana girl who had picked up a rusty rifle and struck every target dead center. At first, these stories were whispered, full of disbelief. Then, as new recruits arrived, they became legend. Emily's name carried weight on the base, not because she flaunted her skill, but because her actions had proven her extraordinary competence. Even seasoned instructors acknowledged that her approach, calm, precise, and deliberate, was exemplary. She had redefined what it meant to be an exceptional recruit. Emily's influence extended beyond marksmanship. Her ability to maintain composure under pressure became a model for leadership. She led small training exercises, guiding recruits through complex drills with patience and clarity. She encouraged observation, attention to detail, and mental focus, teaching lessons she had internalized on her Montana ranch. Many recruits, who had once dismissed her as quiet or timid, now followed her example, discovering that strength did not always come from volume or aggression. It could come from measured, deliberate action and calm confidence. One afternoon, the base commander summoned Emily to his office. He smiled warmly, gesturing for her to sit. "Private Carter," he began, "your performance and leadership over the past months have been exemplary. You've shown skill, patience, and discipline beyond your years. The way you've influenced your peers is remarkable. I want you to know that your actions have set a new standard on this base. You're not just a marksman, you're a model of excellence." Emily inclined her head respectfully, feeling a quiet pride. Recognition was gratifying, but not her ultimate goal. She had already achieved her own measure of success through preparation, persistence, and focus. News of Emily's achievements reached her family back in Montana, and letters arrived with pride and admiration. Her father wrote of the honor he felt, recalling the countless early mornings she had spent working on the ranch, perfecting her aim with livestock and target practice. Her mother expressed awe at her daughter's composure and determination. Emily read each letter carefully, storing the words of encouragement in her heart. Aware that her journey was both personal and collective, a bridge between her upbringing and the extraordinary path she had carved on Fort Benning's grounds. Emily's final marksmanship test of the training year was scheduled for the new recruits, a symbolic passing of the torch. She stood at the firing line, the old M16 gleaming in her hands. Around her, fresh recruits lined up nervously, rifles in hand, unsure of what to expect. Emily's presence alone inspired focus. She demonstrated her technique with quiet precision, explaining stance, sight alignment, and breath control. When the new recruits took aim, her guidance was evident in their improved performance. They hit targets they might have missed otherwise, learning that patience, observation, and discipline could yield extraordinary results. By the end of the year, Emily had become more than a remarkable marksman. She was a mentor, a model, and an emblem of what quiet determination could achieve. Her story, once whispered in disbelief, had evolved into legend. New recruits arriving at the base were told about the Montana girl who had shocked everyone with a rusty rifle, and veterans still spoke of the perfection she had achieved. Emily had transformed doubt into inspiration, ridicule into respect, and ordinary tools into instruments of mastery. Her legacy extended beyond the range. Recruits emulated her work ethic, instructors recognized her leadership potential, and the culture of the base subtly shifted. The qualities Emily embodied, patience, focus, preparation, and quiet confidence, became as valuable as physical strength or technical skill. Those who trained under her or observed her learned that success was not measured by volume, aggression, or immediate recognition, but by consistent effort, discipline, and integrity. One crisp evening, Emily walked the empty range alone. The targets she had hit months ago still stood, faded but marked with the memory of her achievement. She raised the rifle gently, testing the sights, recalling the countless hours she had spent cleaning and perfecting it. Each round she imagined firing was a reminder of the quiet triumphs that had built her confidence, skill, and respect. The rifle, once considered worthless, remained a symbol of transformation, of what could be achieved with patience, preparation, and unwavering focus. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the moment she arrived at Fort Benning, underestimated and mocked, to the point where she had achieved perfection on the range and earned the admiration of her peers and instructors, she had grown not just as a soldier, but as a person. She had proven that true strength was not always loud or visible. It could be quiet, steady, and deeply intentional. Emily Carter's story became a lesson for every recruit who followed. It was a reminder that preparation, patience, and belief in one's abilities could overcome doubt, skepticism, and even ridicule. The legend of the Montana girl with the rusty rifle became part of the base's culture, inspiring generations of recruits to approach their training with focus and determination. And through it all, Emily remained as she had always been, calm, composed, and quietly confident, letting her actions speak louder than words ever could. By the time graduation day arrived, Emily was no longer simply a recruit. She was a figure of respect, an exemplar of excellence. The base commander presented her with a commendation, citing her marksmanship, leadership, and influence over her peers. Her instructors praised her for embodying the qualities every soldier should aspire to: discipline, patience, and precision. Recruits who had once laughed at her now lined up to shake her hand, eager to learn from the woman who had turned a rusty rifle into a symbol of mastery. Emily accepted the recognition with quiet grace. She had achieved what few could claim. She had transformed doubt into accomplishment, ridicule into respect, and a simple tool into an instrument of legendary skill. Her journey from a quiet Montana recruit to a celebrated marksman and mentor at Fort Benning was a testament to what determination, focus, and preparation could achieve. And in the end, the legacy she left behind was not only in perfect bullseyes, but in the hearts and minds of everyone who had witnessed her remarkable journey.